Offensive line is always a big topic when it comes to the Cincinnati Bengals. Where will they take an offensive lineman? Let's break down this entire class in the 2023 NFL Draft with Joe Goodberry. Hi again, everyone, and welcome in to Cincinnati Bengals Talk. He is Joe Goodberry. I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for watching. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, and let's talk offensive linemen. And speaking of offensive line, I have to give Ted Karras a shout out because the Cincy Hat is back. It's better than ever. And go to the cincyhat.com right now for their latest swag right here that I'm wearing. Yeah. Oh, you see this polo, Joe? Yeah. Swagged out with the polo as well. And 100% of the proceeds go to Village of Marici, a great cause. So you need to check them out right now at the cincyhat.com. And Joe, let's dive into offensive line because the obvious weakness, question mark, whatever it is at right tackle for the Bengals. And Jonah's still on the roster as of now, as we record this. But could they take a right tackle or an offensive tackle at 28 in round one? Let's start there. What are the odds you think that the Bengals address the offensive line in the first round?
I would say extremely low, only because, and it's not because it's not a need and it's not a premium position, something they'd love to solidify for the next 5 years, right? I don't think the players line up. I don't think the value lines up. I think in this class, the few guys of, the 4 or 5 guys that we expect to be gone are all pushed up just a little bit. Like, I don't think any of them, even Skoronski or Paris Johnson, are blue chip prospects this year. But I think they could go top 10, top 12-ish in a poor class. So I think that's going to follow suit with everyone else. Broderick Jones is going to go a little bit, probably 5 picks earlier than I would have him. I think Darnell Wright probably goes a little bit earlier than a normal right tackle should go. He should be in the range of 28 to 35, but he's going to go instead 17 to 22, in my opinion, and he's not going to be there. So what does that leave for the Bengals in their options? Are they comfortable with a DeJuan Jones out of Ohio State at 28? I don't think they are. I don't think anyone is, to be honest with you. I think most teams are going to view him as more of a risk and put him in rounds 2, maybe even round 3. He may get the Orlando Brown treatment. And then the next guy would be Anton Harrison out of Oklahoma. I think most teams view him as an early second-round pick. I like Anton Harrison a lot. If they made the pick, that'd be cool because I think he's going to be a starting tackle in the league, but he hasn't played right tackle. So it would be a transition. Would you be comfortable starting him right away? I'm going to give the chances at less than 5%.
Okay, so if that's the case, and it's unlikely that one of those guys is there that could fill in right away at right tackle, and you talk about Anton Harrison, if he's not able to be a plug-and-play type guy, I'm not in on him at 28. Let's talk about Dawand Jones a bit more, though, because it does feel like he's falling. And why exactly? Is it as simple as he didn't weigh at his pro day, he didn't test, the precedent is there, there's a lot of questions about him, because I know a lot of people watching this would probably be comfortable with him at 28, maybe even celebrating the pick at 28, and yet I know they've seen the reports that he's falling down draft boards and could be a mid-second rounder.
Yeah, so first of all, like we've talked about with other players, when they're small, we'll call them an outlier. When you're oversized, you're also an outlier. There's not a lot of guys we can compare you to. I mean, honestly, we're looking at Trent Brown and Orlando Brown, a couple of big 6'8", 360 plus pounders that don't move very well, need to learn how to use their strengths to their advantages. I think DeJuan Jones, as a former basketball player, finally got to that where he's realized, hey, I'm bigger than everyone. I'm going to make you run into me or run around me, which are both losing battles. And he had a tremendous year. Honestly, he looked really good. His feet are a mess, and he still needs to work on leverage issues because he's taller. And it's always going to be a challenge for him. I think he would have a great guidance from a guy like Orlando Brown if the Bengals did make that pick. But remember, Orlando Brown, one of the worst combines of all time, right? Similar size situation. He goes in the 3rd round because of it. I think Dawand, not testing, but the little bit that he did show, probably would have put up a similar performance. Nobody was expecting him to perform very well, right? Doesn't look like that kind of guy. When you're that big, it's hard to do that. So it's not so much that it hurts him that he couldn't perform or didn't perform. I should say couldn't. It hurts him more that he didn't perform and that he didn't want to weigh in again at his pro day. In some of the reports you're hearing, that he had more of a flippant attitude to the whole idea and the process of like, why would I even weigh in again, or why would I do any of this stuff again, is going to rub teams the wrong way. Offensive tackle, you're asked to block the most physically gifted players on the football field and defensive ends and edge rushers, right? Those guys are freaks. And 9.9 out of 10 of those edge rushers are elite athletes. You need to be at least a good enough athlete to protect them. Now he's got the size and he can bank on that, and he will bank on that. That will be how he wins in the NFL. But it would have been nice to see at least a baseline of where he's at.
Yeah, I just, you don't like questions at 28. It's why, and we'll do a separate video on Kalijah, but the arm length, that alone, it's like, right? And Dawand Jones obviously has more question marks than that. But let's continue the conversation, because let's say Jones isn't there in round 2. Let's say he goes to the Steelers in the middle of the second round, and people go crazy because they have their right tackle of the future and the present for the foreseeable future. Even though, by the way, I will say this, I love the idea of Orlando Brown Jr. And Dawand Jones. Twin Towers, much like the San Antonio Spurs throwback in the day with David Robinson and Tim Duncan. NBA reference for those that probably don't care. That said, day 2 offensive lineman. Who stands out? Who could the Bengals target? Is it tackle only? Do you think they could look at the interior as early as rounds 2 and 3? How do you view this kind of pocket between picks 32 through 100?
Yeah, there's a fall off. I think it's a pretty drastic fall off if you're looking for a tackle. Typically and historically, if you're looking for a starting tackle, you need to draft him in the first 2 rounds, specifically in the first 50 picks. The Bengals pick at 60. And I think this draft is going to reflect that. And I don't think the guys drafted afterwards are going to be plug and play guys, or even really probably have the odds stacked against them to potentially be a starter. And I'm talking about guys like Blake Freeland out of BYU, Matthew Bergeron out of Syracuse. Maybe it's Tyler Steen out of Alabama, Wanya Morris out of Oklahoma. But I think those 2 are 3rd, 4th round types. Maybe the guy with the best chance is a Cody Mauch out of North Dakota, same as our guy Cordell Volson. I think he's more of a guard, and I think teams are going to view him as a guard, and maybe even center. So, I think
that's why I like him. That's why I like him.
And I could see that. I could see them saying, "Hey, look at the injuries we've had the last 2 years, right? Like we don't know where that's going to come." Anyone who's watched this team the last 2 years, you're going to get. I would say anyone would predict this. There's going to be at least one backup offensive lineman playing if they make it to the AFC Championship game again. There's probably going to be one. They're probably going to be down to your 4th corner. It's what's happened the last 2 years. The depth, and you don't know where it's going to be on the O-line. They've missed their left guard before. It ended up being Quentin Spain starting. They've missed their center before. They've missed their right guard, right tackle, left tackle, whatever. They've all dealt with their injuries. Cody Mauch could probably play all 5 positions for you if you needed to. And if you take him in the round 2, I think that's fair value. And I probably would put him a little bit ahead of Blake Freeland and Matthew Bergeron. But those are the guys we're probably talking about, is Mauch, Freeland, Bergeron. Maybe one of those guys are still there in round 3. I think there's even a gap after those guys. When I mentioned Tyler Steen and Wanya Morris, and maybe it's a Luke Weipler, maybe it's a Joe Tippmann on the inside. I think Weipler's only a center. I think Tippmann can play guard or center at a 6'6" guy. So maybe you see the versatility there. Again, I don't see it perfectly lining up. If they make these picks, I feel like they're a bit of a reach in order to fill a need.
Yeah, that's the trouble with Weipler to me. I was like, oh, well, could he do more than just play center? Because if not, I don't think they're taking a day 2 center. I don't. Now, if you can do multiple positions, Cody Mauch, he would fit the Glass Eater profile. Just Google a picture of him, and I'm sure Andrew will edit one in. But yeah, he would be fun for sure. And you would say NDSU is OLU. It's Offensive Line University now for the Bengals if they're able to land him. But heck, I think he could go top 45 in Cody Mauch. You never know. That said, day 3. Let's say they don't go offensive line round 1. You just talked about how it doesn't really line up rounds 2 to 3. And I think this is a very real scenario, and why Jonah Williams could certainly be the opening day right tackle. But day 3, who do you like? Who could they potentially target in round 4 in the 130s or beyond that, when we're really talking about, end of the draft type guys?
Yeah, and I thought when you mentioned the versatility and why you're wearing the Ted Karras hat, right? Maybe you could
Mhm.
find a guy that can play guard for a year and then move over to center, or 2 years and then move over to center. Maybe it's a really good center is still there in round 3, and you're like, hey, Ted Karras has played left guard before. Maybe he plays left guard. So the options are there if it happens. We didn't mention John Michael Schmitz as a potential at 60 if he's still there, the center out of Minnesota. There's a couple other guys. Maybe Osiris Torrance is still there. I don't expect it. Stephen Avila is still there. I don't expect it, right? So day 3, right? They've met with a bunch of guys with top 30 visits as well. So I'm going to run off those real fast. They've met with Jalen Duncan out of Maryland, who I think is probably a 4th-round pick, extremely raw. He needs a lot of work, and I think that's why at best he's a 4th, could even be a 5th. John Ojukwu out of Boise State, who I do like the upside there, but he's 24 years old. Then they met with Colby Swordsall from William and Mary, so a lot of low round, maybe 7th rounders, and Jake
I like
Witt.
him.
I know.
I like Corby.
Yeah.
Colby.
And then Jake Witt out of Northern Michigan, who tested like an absolute freak, like a god. And he played basically 1 year at offensive tackle because he was a tight end before, and they ran injuries, and they're like, hey, we need someone to play tackle. Apparently he's like, I can do it. Went in and played at 250 pounds and then had to gain the other 60 to play. And he did it in the following year and then played offensive tackle the whole year. And there's one other too that they met with at the combine, and Richard Garage out of Florida. So they are interested, it seems, in a late round tackle. Those are just developmental hope type picks. But I think this class doesn't line up exactly where they pick and where they may need. So I know we want to address offensive line. I know you're probably wanting to pick an offensive lineman every year just to protect Joe Burrow. But man, I keep coming through these simulators and saying at no point are the best players available offensive linemen, usually, unless somebody falls. And maybe that's the scenario we can't just foresee.
How comfortable would you be with this offensive line if they didn't add an offensive lineman that is able to contribute? I'm not going to count a 7th rounder that's just a flyer at the end, but if they don't get a guy that can potentially contribute as a rookie, are you comfortable with their line? Obviously, that would likely mean Jonah Williams at right tackle this season.
It's funny because they've got maybe 4 guys that might compete at right tackle. If you say Jonah, Leal comes back at some point. Jackson.
I don't think they both can be on the team either.
That's a lot of money.
Hang up.
Right.
Leal and Jonah.
You're going to bench one at least $7.5 million for Leal. It'd be tough, but you'd have good depth. So
yeah.
But it sounds like Jackson Carman's going to get his chance at right tackle. Hakeem Adeniji is probably still in the mix, even though we've seen enough of him. But then they also signed Cody Ford. So I feel better about their tackle depth than I do their guard depth. I think if one of those guys goes down, I don't feel great about Adeniji ever at guard. Last time we saw Jackson Carman in that spot, he hasn't looked good. They've got nothing out of Deontay Smith and Trey Hill. I think they could draft guard. Maybe it's a day 3 guy that's played a lot, that's pretty consistent. And I think like an Antonio Mafi out of UCLA could plug in at left guard right away for you, or right guard if you need it. And, I think that's where we could see these picks. Maybe we don't see an offensive line pick till rounds 5 or 6, and then a lottery ticket tackle in round 7.
We saw it last year. Everyone was wondering where the hell offensive line was, and they waited till round 4, and they drafted a guy no one heard of, and he started every game for them in Cordell Volson. I mean,
it's true.
Not many people knew who he was when they drafted him.
He was not on our sheet, so
North Dakota State,
right?
I mean, that's the part of it where it gets quite interesting. Maybe they'll go the 1AA route again. You mentioned Swordsel. You never know if they do that. I think that they clearly value, and they're looking for the right character, the right size and makeup, and obviously some physical talent. But those other 2 things, they're like, all right, if we get that and they have some talent, we can get more out of them.
And I think there's a lot of guys this year. It's not just offensive line. We've talked about it with corner, defensive lineman, wide receiver, safety, quarterback. The first player in the draft may be an outlier. There's a lot of those guys on the offensive line again. And I wonder if the Bengals are willing to take those guys, because I think they've had a rough success of taking tackles, moving them to guard because they're too small, right? Jackson Carman, Hakeem Adeniji, Deontay Smith. And they've also had, I think, with smaller guys like Jonah Williams, they haven't been able to maximize their talents, right? So do they want to go with that again? Billy Price as well, who is very stubby for a center. Like, do you want to do that? Or are you now setting the standard of we can't we can't forego size. Like size has to be one of the things we do in this draft or when we're drafting any offensive lineman. And I think we see it with Cordell Volson, very big for a guard, and then signing Orlando Brown right away. So I think they're looking at it like size is a premium now, and I'd be watching those guys first.
DeJuan Jones, there you go. Man, if just fall to 60. Clear this up, fall to 60, and we'll see you in round 2. Who knows if that actually happens, but make sure you check out Joe Goodberry. Follow him on Twitter at Joe Goodberry for more. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell. Check out all of our draft breakdown videos. At this point, there's been a ton. We've been bugging Joe, and so make sure you watch all of them right here on Cincinnati Bengals Talk. For Andrew Fox Miller, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for watching.